Stand Up.
Hello and welcome to Stand Up with Pete Dominic Daily. I'm Pete Dominic. Very happy to have you here. Excited to have Dr. Colin Clarke joining me today. Really great conversation with this national security expert, terrorism expert. We talked about a new white paper that he's put out at the Soufan Center, which is an independent nonprofit organization founded by my friend, former FBI agent and terrorism expert Ali Soufan. Talked with Colin Clarke about this paper that they've just put out, taking a deep dive into all of the consequences that could arise as a result of the Trump regime's war against the cartels. The title of the paper is War Against the Cartels, Prospects and Perils for the Trump Administration's Military-Led Campaign. Had a great conversation with Colin, and if you want to jump to it, it's really interesting and important. It begins at 35 minutes into today's show. But of course, I've got your headlines and your clip show. Can't do any of it without you. It's a daily podcast. I used to host a live daily radio show with 3 guests, journalists, scholars, scientists, artists, actors, comedians, the smartest, most interesting people I could find. Took live callers, and I did it with a great team of producers at SiriusXM for about 12 years. And I'm very proud of everything that we accomplished there and the connections that we made and the growth that we had, all the different channels and iterations of the show, several different producers, so many great interns and other people. And I learned so much over those years. The most important thing I learned is that if I get good guests on this show, you'll keep coming back. And so that's what I've been trying to do. That's the one very consistent thing. At one point, I was having 2 guests a day, 5 days a week, but that insanity had to eventually end. Certainly helped build the show, but I was really losing my mind. Now, it's still a lot, of course, each and every day, and it's so much different than the old show. But this show, too, is changing, as many of you told me, pretty rough at the start. So I am so grateful to those of you that have stuck with me and to all of the new folks that have discovered the show and our community. Welcome and thank you. I don't want to make a big deal of the fact that I'm turning 50 this weekend. I don't want to make a big deal of the fact that this is almost 1,500 shows or the beginning of the 5th year of this podcast. I really don't. I just want to say thank you and try to find new ways to let you know how grateful I am that you support this work and this lifestyle that I've chosen, at least for now, during these crazy times that we're living through. We have found that community is so important and central to finding our way through it. And I have met so many amazing people through this community. I know so many of you have connected with each other. And so my heart is full, my glass is full as I enter my 50th year, or really my 51st. I just want you to know how much I appreciate you and give you the deepest, most heartfelt gratitude I can offer up. Really looking forward to whatever comes next, to making the show better, to taking advantage of all the new platforms and technology as I kind of muddle and struggle through it. I appreciate your support. I hope it's entertaining to watch me fail in these different ways, as long as we continue to get these great guests, which are, of course, the strength of the show, and connect with each other through the community at our Hangouts and on the Discord platform. I think that's the best we can do. It's the best I can do, and I just can't do it without you. So there you go. My gratitude offering to you, my celebration of it all, and now it's time to get to today's news. Time for the shit show.
It's Pete's Headlines and Clip Show. Get in on the shit show.
All right. Yes, every day's a shit show. That's why it's a perfect name for the news segment. So it looks like Israel and Gaza are now accusing each other of violating the ceasefire. The lunatic in charge in Israel, the Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu, has called for powerful attacks, quote, powerful attacks, and Israel has launched new strikes on Gaza. So at least 9 people have been killed, apparently, in Gaza already overnight, and I'm not sure what this means for the peace that Trump created. Did he still end the war there? I mean, listen, the hostage He was instrumental in the hostage exchange. They put out some plan for the future, which really was apparently hasn't been taken seriously, it would seem. And they are back to shooting at each other. And Israel will continue to, of course, disproportionately attack. And it's potentially going to get real ugly again. So brace yourself for more horrible news coming out from the region. Powerful Hurricane Melissa hit Jamaica with, quote, devastating force on Monday afternoon, tearing off roofs, dumping rain. When the storm made landfall around midday, it was spinning with sustained 185-mile-an-hour winds, making it one of the strongest Atlantic hurricanes on record, stronger even than Katrina. After hours over the country, she weakened to apparently a Category 4. I haven't seen any terrible, huge loss of life as of yet, but I'm sure we probably will. It looks terrible, but it's expected to maintain powerful hurricane strength, set to make landfall last night or this morning in Cuba. After that, it'll head towards the Bahamas and then hopefully straight out to the Atlantic. That is the update from the Hurricane Center here at Stand Up. We don't have a Hurricane Center, but I just felt like that. I needed to say that. The U.S. has now killed 14 people accused of smuggling drugs. Talk more about this with my guest, Dr. Colin Clarke, today. But our DUI Defense Secretary Pete Hegseth said yesterday that U.S. troops have destroyed 4 more vessels that he accused of smuggling drugs. The strikes, which Hegseth said were carried out in the Eastern Pacific, killed 14 people, the biggest one-day toll since the campaign began last month. Apparently one person survived. Of course, these attacks violate U.S. law, and now Pete Hegseth is referring to them as narco-terrorists, as more that have killed more Americans than Al-Qaeda, and he thinks they should be treated the same. And I think that's a convincing argument to a lot of people, and it's really unfortunate. In other news from the regime, a federal judge has admonished the senior Border Patrol official, who some of you, if you're paying close attention, you've learned his name. His name is Gregory Bavino. He seems like a real son of a bitch, and he's become the face of Trump's crackdown on illegal immigration. Well, a federal judge admonished him for his agency's use of force and tear gas in Chicago. I don't know exactly what an admonishment means, but yesterday in a courtroom in downtown Chicago, a federal judge read Bavino restrictions that she had previously said as part of a lawsuit over tactics that agents are using, cited examples of times as agents appeared to violate those restrictions. So I just think it's really important that this hearing is happening and that he has to show up and walk through a crowd of journalists as he entered the federal building. Bavino answered some questions with a simple yes, ma'am, asked whether he was on the same page as the judge. He said, I understand what you're saying, Your Honor. We're on the same page, and we'll abide by the TRO, whatever that means. We'll see if he does. I highly doubt it. I think he's just telling her whatever she needs to hear and thinks somehow that he is above the law and has immunity from whatever happens, as well as so do his guys, his thugs, his stormtroopers. So there you have it. And what else do I have for you here? Oh, this is interesting. Yesterday, Republicans broke ranks in the Senate, and they passed a bill to rescind Trump's tariffs on Brazil. So Murkowski, Susan Collins, Rand Paul, Tom Tillis, and former Republican leader Mitch the Turtle McConnell joined all the Democrats in favor. The vote took place on day 28 of the federal government shutdown, with both sides at loggerheads over the spending legislation, according to the article I'm looking at here. And while the Supreme Court is set to consider a case challenging Trump's authority to impose broad global tariffs brought in through his, quote, Emergency Economic Powers Act, lower courts have found that the president does not have the legal authority to enact the levies. So we'll see what happens in the House with this, as well as if they ever come back into session, and obviously at the court. But I thought that was an interesting vote, and that those 5 Republicans crossed the line to support something that Republicans always supported, or at least said they did, until the king took over. Speaking of that piece of shit, I just got to say, this is one of the most upsetting, infuriating stories that I've read in a minute. But I don't know what could be more symbolically racist than celebrating Confederate generals. And yesterday, our white supremacists in chief had a Confederate statue that had been toppled during the Black Lives Matter protests, reinstated reinstalled. That's right. Old Albert Pike, who is a Confederate general who many suspected was a Ku Klux Klan member. Well, he's back up, and, I think you know what to do. So I just can't think of anything more specifically infuriating to do symbolically. I mean, I think the most racist thing you can do, action you could take, is limit opportunity specifically of black folks, and that's what the Voting Rights Act repeal does, of course, on purpose. But the reinstalling or the celebration of Confederate generals, it's beyond grotesque and horrific and ugly. It's infuriating because they know what they're doing and why they are doing it. And I'm sure you share my disgust at this. I'm sorry that I had to share it with you. If you heard it from me first, I'm sorry, because that was a rough one. And so old Bragger Vance was in Japan, in Tokyo. He gave a speech to the troops on a warship that is stationed there. He was hanging out with the new prime minister. He was getting lost. He had no idea what he was doing. He made a long, awful speech. But apparently, he found an easy rapport with Japan's new leader. I guess maybe he's not attracted to her. She's an older woman, and maybe he doesn't want to sexually assault her. So, he gets along with her. Maybe he's intimidated by her. Anyway, he's overseas, so that's good. We like it when he's out of the country, but we also don't like it because he's just embarrassing us on a different stage and still posting all kinds of crazy shit all the time on his dumb third-rate social media site. All right, well, more than 24 states are suing the Trump administration yesterday over its recent refusal to fund food stamps during the government shutdown. Weeks ago, the Agriculture Department said that it could reprogram money to prevent benefit cuts, but now it says that the funds are not, quote, legally available. About 42 million low-income Americans who rely on the monthly payments to buy groceries are set to lose access to the program on November 1st if Congress fails to fund the government this week. Got some great audio coming up from Congresswoman Melanie Stansbury about that tangling with CNN's Jake Tapper. And speaking of the courts, a federal judge in California granted a preliminary injunction blocking the Trump regime from laying off thousands of federal workers during the government shutdown. The judge extended the temporary halt she ordered earlier this month and promised a written order shortly, but these layoffs have been halted, so there's some relief there. Let's go to Texas, where their insane attorney general, Ken Paxton, with the weird eyes, wife just dumped him, just covered in scandal and crime. He was attempted impeachment. I mean, this guy is one of the worst of the worst. Well, his search for rock bottom is ongoing. He's now sued current and former makers of Tylenol, echoing the debunked Trump administration claims and accusing the companies of concealing potential ties to autism. So there you go. Congratulations. Stay classy, Ken Paxton. The White House has withdrawn the nomination of this guy, Joel Rayburn. That was Trump's pick to serve as an assistant secretary of state. No reason was provided for the move by the officials, who were not authorized to speak publicly about the withdrawal of Joel Rayburn. But he's a retired Army officer who served as a U.S. Special Envoy for Syria during the first Trump administration. He was nominated to lead the Middle East policy as Assistant Secretary of State for Near Eastern Affairs. So we'll find out why. We don't really know why, apparently, but I think we'll probably find out soon. Either he wasn't racist enough, or they found out just how racist overtly he was. I don't know. It's always interesting when these things happen. You're not sure what the story is. This is interesting. In a new memo, Bill Gates is warning against climate alarmism. He's appeared to have shifted some of his views about climate change. We'll have to look into that. UPS said that it had cut 48,000 jobs this year, mostly among drivers and warehouse staff. And we've just found out that the Supreme Court has scheduled a hearing to listen to Kim Davis's challenge to same-sex marriage at their private conference on Friday, November 7th. So that's an important date to mark down. And remember Kim Davis. Yeah, she didn't want to marry the gay people. So most Supreme Court experts we talk to say that they won't overturn Obergefell, marriage equality, but I don't think anybody knows, as they would also be the first to admit. Well, ladies and gentlemen, those are the headlines that I've gathered for you. Now it's time to get to that clip show, the best in audio that I got from yesterday. Let's start off with one of our favorites, comedian Trey Crowder. He does these about 3-minute car rants, or rants from his car, I guess. And they're so well written, and he delivers them always on point. And I love him. Love Trey. Love these rants. So let's start there.
Hey, y'all, next Tuesday, California votes on Prop 50, which would allow the state to gerrymander itself in favor of Democrats. And naturally, the Republicans are reacting the way they always react whenever Democrats try to do a thing that they themselves have openly, unapologetically been doing for years now, with self-righteous, indignant rage. They're all over the place going like, Democrats want you to believe they have to do this because we're rigging the system, but blue states like Massachusetts are 30-something% Republican and they have 0 Republican representatives. No, Democrats are the ones rigging the system, and your Aunt Tammy and the rest of the base hears that and they eat it up. No questions asked, right? Why would they? They live there in their curated MAGA bubbles together, in there safe with each other, never venturing out into the forbidden cities. No, here there be drag queens. No, they stay in the bubble together where it's safe, just in there just believing wild shit and fucking up potato salad all the live long day. And if you ask them, do you know any liberals? They'll say, oh, heavens no. I think Debbie had one son that was like that, but he moved to California and turned gay, so they disowned him, and now he lives on the streets. Praise Jesus. And between all that and the fact that they see these electoral maps that are shaded by county where the whole country's engulfed in red, and these people are fully convinced that their philosophy is the popular one, that the vast majority of Americans agree with them, and that Democrats only ever win anything by cheating, right? And that would be true if not for the fact that it ain't even a little bit true. No, the truth, of course, always, eternally, is the exact opposite of what these people think. But good luck convincing them of that. You could tell them, like, no, that map is based on land. Land don't vote. People vote. Look, this map is based on people. Look at this. And they'll just laugh in your face and be like, America ain't made of a bunch of little circles. How stupid do you think I am? Right? And then you're like, okay, but that Massachusetts thing, yes, the state is 30-something% Republican, but they're spread out in such a way that it's literally impossible to draw a Republican congressional district in the state of, and before you can even finish, that guy's halfway back to the discount skull flag store. Not a care in the world. They don't want to hear it. They're not going to hear it. But the truth is the system favors Republicans, right? California has 40 million people, more than most European countries. Wyoming has a population of 500,000, but I'm pretty sure at least 40% of that is horses they let vote. And yet both states have exactly the same number of senators. Who does that favor? In 2020, Joe Biden handily won the popular vote, but yet if less than 50,000 votes across only 3 states had gone the other way, Trump would have been the president again, because the Electoral College favors Republicans. That's why it's the only college they don't think is for pussies. Even still, I'm kind of expecting them to change it to the electoral octagon any day now. But still, everything favors them, and yet it's still close, right? Which is because of how unpopular they are. And they know it. Why do you think they do all this voter suppression shit that they do? There's like, yeah, look, we're actually super popular and people love us. But, I mean, if we can't let those people vote, or else we would literally never win anything again. And between that and the fact that they've stacked the courts, we've effectively enshrined minority rule into law in this country, right? And now, after years of twiddling their thumbs and hoping for the best, the Democrats have seen the writing on the wall, and they're trying to play by the same rules. And the Republicans are very pissed off about that, which is exactly how you know it's the right thing to do. We just got to hope it's not too little, too late.
Yeah. Well, might be too little, too late for a lot of people and a lot of things. Just saying. Well, let's move on to the dumbest senator in the entire U.S. Senate. I think it's probably pretty clear, is a guy named Tommy Tuberville of Alabama. He was asked if Donald Trump can have a third term. And here's what he had to say about Con Juan.
If you read the Constitution, it says he's not, but if he says he has some different circumstances that might be able to go around the Constitution, but that's up to him. We got a long way to go before that happens. Well, I think that there's going to have to be an evaluation from President Trump's viewpoint to the Constitution. There will be a lot of legal aspects to it. Will it happen? It's very unlikely, but don't ever close the book on President Trump.
Oh, there's nothing we'd like to do more than close the book on Donald Trump. I mean, the vast majority of human beings living in the world would like to close the door, the book, anything on Donald Trump. Ooh, it'll be a celebration. Speaking of dumb senators, here is a dumb one as well, but also maybe even more insidious. This guy's name is Bernie Moreno. And hard to believe that he is a senator from Ohio, but he was on CNN and was asked about health insurance reform and what the Republicans' plan are. Psst, they don't have one.
On healthcare, Senator, what is someone who has open enrollment starting November 1st supposed to do in response to the idea that it would take 3 to 4 months to coalesce around a plan?
Look, Obamacare is a total and complete disaster. Having the COVID era...
But what's Republicans' plan to counter that, I think is my question.
I'm answering it for you. Look, we can't fix Obamacare in 3 months. What I'm telling you is that the COVID-era subsidies are a tiny fraction of any increase. The increase is happening because Obamacare is broken. It's a complete, abject failure. There isn't a single Republican that voted for Obamacare. This is a Democrat plan. You should ask the next Democrat that you have on, what is your plan to fix your health care plan? Because it's objectively terrible. We will bring competition to the marketplace. We'll absolutely increase transparency. We'll have PBM reform. President Trump has done a ton to lower prescription drug prices. We're going to have most favored nation status. We can do it, but we need to put together a coalition to make that happen.
I'm not defending Obamacare or the subsidies on that, but it has been 15 years. I know you've only been in the Senate. You're new to Washington, relatively new, but some people may say, well, there's been 15 years since Obamacare passed. We haven't seen a Republican plan to replace it.
Well, Obama was president for 4 years. President Trump was president for 4 years. And then, of course, Biden came in and made everything objectively worse. And by the way, you can't defend Obamacare because it's indefensible. You're acknowledging
there was a Republican president in between those two Democrats who's now back in office.
In a very different situation. He only had 2 years of unified control of government. We got the most important bill done, which is tax relief for all Americans that stimulated our economy. And it had not been for COVID, we would have been in a totally different situation. Had the President Trump had a second term that was consecutive, it would have been a very different situation.
Yeah. I don't know why I played that one for you. I'm sorry. I apologize. You're going to be even more upset with this one. This is Jake Tapper talking to the oversight chairman, James Comer. And, of course, I don't love the way Tapper handles this because he should have pushed harder and been more incredulous the way he is with a Democratic congresswoman coming up about SNAP benefits. He's more incredulous about that than he is about all the criming that the Trump family is doing, is my quick hot take. But here it is, James Comer basically saying it's okay if you crime in front of everybody. It's those people who just don't talk about their crimes that we have. That's corruption.
But I want to ask you one more thing before you go, as long as I have you, because you're chairman of the Oversight Committee. Right. There's a Reuters report today on the Trump family's crypto ventures. Based on the family's own financial disclosures, Reuters found the Trump organization's income from the first half of this year shot from $51 million to $864 million. About $800 million of that is from crypto. And the story details how most of the buyers are foreign investors and how all this money is going to belong to Trump when he leaves office. Is this something that you're going to look into at all?
Well, it's something that we are, like you, reading about this. We're trying to digest it. The difference between the way the Trump family is operating and the Biden family is they're admitting they're doing this. The president campaigned as a business guy. I'm not defending the policy. I think there need to be ethics reforms, and I had a bill that Jamie Raskin killed last session because he thought that Kamala Harris was going to win the presidency, but it would have increased the disclosure. So as long as you disclose your income and disclose the sources, I think that's acceptable. If you lie about the income, you say, I never received money from China, and then we subpoena your bank records and there's $5 million from China, I think that's a problem. So, I think it's a legitimate question. A lot of people are concerned, especially since the crypto industry isn't regulated. But as my position now, as long as the president's disclosing this, and they're filling out disclosures and they're answering questions. He answers questions about it. If you ask him about his crypto, he'll say, yes, they've got the best crypto country in the world. Now, do the voters like that? I think that's going to be an issue in the next presidential election. I think it's a fair question. But from an ethics standpoint and from an oversight standpoint, the president is disclosing this income, and that, I think, is the most important part, the transparency.
All right, we're out of time.
All right, we're out of time. That's it, I guess. That's all. I mean, Hunter Biden murdered people behind closed doors, but Trump murders lots more people right in front of everyone. So that's up to the American people to decide. All right. Well, the Agriculture Department announced that it would not use $6 billion in congressionally appropriated emergency funding to feed children, maintain the benefits from the Supplemental Nutritional Assistance Program, which provides food stamps to more than 40 million Americans and I think like 20 million children. As a result, a group of more than 24 states are suing the Trump administration, seeking to maintain funding for the so-called SNAP benefits during the ongoing federal government shutdown. And now I see that it looks like Trump himself has caved and suggested that his administration may find a way to fund SNAP after all. Well, we'll see. But here is, again, CNN's Jay Tapper giving a real hard time to Congresswoman Melanie Stansbury.
That they can use the hunger of children to try to leverage Democrats rather than feeding 42 million Americans. And we're not going to stand for it. We're going to sue them. We're going to use the courts. We're going to use Congress. And we're going to do everything we can at the community level to make sure that Americans can put food on the table this weekend.
Should the Democratic,
and we're not going to stand for it.
Should the Democratic senators from New Mexico, your home state, vote to open the government so that these SNAP funds are not at risk?
Let me be clear. The administration is choosing to starve American children with money that they already have appropriated.
I'm not applauding their
tactics. By the White House. Well, this is a choice by the White House.
This is also, Congresswoman, this is also a choice by Senate Democrats to not vote to open the government. Yes, it is. I understand why they're doing it. They're doing it because they want Medicaid funds restored. They're doing it because they want Obamacare premiums to be extended past the end of the year. I understand the reasoning.
Sir, let me just be clear. The money for contingency plans is sitting there. That is why the states are suing. The White House is withholding funds from
2 to 3
children
weeks worth of SNAP funds.
Food.
Yeah.
Yeah, well, it may not be a big deal to you, but let me tell you that for the grandparents, for grandparents that literally are feeding their children,
my point is that it's a short-term solution.
In those accounts.
It's a short-term.
At the end of the day, people need to be able to feed their families, and Saturday is when those funds run out.
If you feel so strongly, Congresswoman, why not ask the Senate Democrats from New Mexico to vote to open the government so that the SNAP funds...
Sir, I am here in the House of Representatives. It is shut down. I am fighting to get the government reopened. I am fighting to get funding put back into SNAP that is already existent, and I am fighting for the American people. I am here. But show me a single Republican that is here. Not a single one is here to make sure that Americans are fed on Saturday. That is why I am here.
Huh. Tapper. Really giving her a hard time. Really thinks that she should... I don't even need to comment on that. All right, let's move on, though, to the governor of California, Gavin Newsom, talking about this same issue. You know, food for people who can't afford it at this moment in their lives.
This is a holiday season. This is when food banks are already busy. This is when there's already a lot of pressure and anxiety. And anyone that's, bought coffee, you understand prices are through the roof, record-breaking prices. Inflation's out of control once again in this country. Ask any of us that bought a pound of beef. Many of you are buying Halloween candy. It's up 10.8%. Just since this administration took the oath of office. President, so desperate, he's overseas trying to clean up his mess. He's telling people to buy today foreign cars, which is extraordinary, and foreign beef. He's found $20 billion, didn't he? Found $20 billion to send to wannabe dictator in Argentina. Now he wants to buy beef from Argentina. $20 billion he found, but he can't provide as legally required $6 billion from a contingency fund that was set up precisely for this moment. That's about cruelty, period. That's all this is about.
Yeah, exactly. And leverage, because they know the Democrats support feeding people, and that's going to try to bring them to the negotiating table on the government shutdown. All right, here's a little bit more from Gavin Newsom. He gets all biblical, but it makes a point.
The Speaker of the House of Representatives remarkably once again lied when he said, well, it's government shutdown. There's nothing we can do about it. You can see the board right behind the Attorney General. There's been situations in the past consistently. This program has been funded during government shutdowns. He lied. Once again, he lied. It's also interesting to me because I spent a little time at a wonderful Jesuit university. If there was anything I remember about my 4 years with Father Cause, is that the New Testament and Old Testament have one thing dominantly in common. Matthew and Isaiah, Luke, Proverbs, go down the list. It's around food. It's about serving those that are hungry. It's not a suggestion in the Old and New Testament. It's core and central to what it is to align to God's will, period, full stop. I say that because these guys need to stop the BS in Washington, D.C. So they're sitting there in their prayer breakfasts. I mean, maybe they got an edited version of Donald Trump's Bible, and they edited all of that out. I mean, enough of this. Cruelty is the policy. That's what this is about. It's intentional cruelty, intentionally creating anxiety for millions and millions of people, 5.5 million here in our home state. So, again, our state of mind is pretty clear. We're going to win this lawsuit.
Yeah, and one of the other states that signed on, and one of those attorneys general is from Oregon, who we've gotten to learn as a result of what's happening in Portland. It's the attorney general there, Dan Rayfield. Here's what he had to say about the president using food benefits as a political tool.
This is the first time in our country's history where we've had a president who said, you know what, I'm going to use food benefits for a political tool. So we asked once, we sent a letter, said, hey, you need to release those funds. We asked a second time with all the attorneys general. They ignored our requests. And so today we filed a lawsuit to compel them to release the funds that Congress specifically appropriated. Democrats and Republicans appropriated to make sure that Oregonians have food. And why it's so darn important, we have 415,000 or about 450,000 families that rely upon SNAP benefits and around 214,000, that's right, 214,000 children that rely on SNAP benefits every month. So this is a huge impact. It has to be released immediately. And so we filed a temporary restraining order to compel that action as absolutely soon as possible.
All right. There you go. Dan Rayfield weighing in as well. Something's got to be done about that. And it looks like Trump has caved, which would be very good and unsurprising as well. And finally, some more jokes for you. It's Seth Meyers doing the news on Late Night with Seth Meyers on NBC.
If you don't mind, we're going to get to the news. President Trump claimed this week that he is currently getting the, quote, best polling numbers that I have ever received. Okay, I don't know if the people around you are showing you the real numbers. Does the newspaper they showed you also have a picture of Stephen Miller as a sheriff? President Trump also claimed that Republican gubernatorial candidates would lower energy costs and said, quote, under President Trump, gasoline will come down to approximately $2 a gallon very soon. And it is objectively very funny to put the word me in that post, as if we might not know who President Trump is. That said, a lot of his supporters are the same people who can never remember the name of the main character. President Trump and First Lady Melania Trump are set to host a Halloween celebration on Thursday at the White House, but it looks like they already left their jack-o'-lantern out too long.
Picture of RFK Jr.
The Trump administration has posted a timeline in defense of its controversial East Wing demolition project that features so-called major events that took place at the White House, which includes the discovery of cocaine in the building during the Biden presidency. Okay, but it clearly wasn't his. I mean, look at him. He's like the bear they put on tea. President Trump posted a photo of himself sitting in the Oval Office where he appeared to be lit by a spotlight, but it was just the sun coming through the gaping hole in the wall. Tesla has issued a recall for more than 63,000 Cybertrucks because the front lights are too bright. Apparently, you can see people laughing at you from up to 300 yards away. French police said they've been working around the clock to track down the suspects in last week's Louvre jewelry heist. Working around the clock, or as it's known in France, 10:30 to noon and then like 2 to 3:30. And finally, the New York Knicks issued a cease and desist to mayoral candidate Zohran Mamdani after his campaign released an ad that featured the team's logo with the word Knicks replaced with Zohran, while the Giants are claiming Andrew Cuomo stole their idea to lose all the time.
It's so good. I love those jokes. I've been playing them every day on the show lately because I really love that little segment. His writers are great. Seth Meyers on NBC last night. Now it's time for my guest. I'm very excited to have Colin Clarke, Dr. Colin Clarke, joining us again. He's executive director now of the Soufan Center. His research is focused on domestic and transnational terrorism, international security, and geopolitics. He was a professor at Carnegie Mellon, a senior political analyst at RAND, where he spent a decade researching terrorism, insurgency, and criminal networks. He's got all kinds of other credits and titles, real impressive background, and he's testified before Congress numerous occasions as an expert witness on a range of terrorism-related issues. Really happy to have him back on the show. He's joined me several times here. Today we're talking about this new white paper that the Soufan Center has put out, which is important and helps explain all of the potential consequences of the new front on the drug war, the war against the cartels, prospects and perils for the Trump administration's military-led campaign is what this issue brief is titled. Dr. Colin Clarke co-authoring it with Ben Conable, and I read it and I wanted to talk to him, and so I asked him, will you come talk to me? And yes, he said. So I'm very excited to have Dr. Colin Clarke joining me. I learned a lot from this. We did it live. If you want to watch it, it lives on YouTube at youtube.com/standupwithpete. So here we go right now with Colin Clarke of the Soufan Center. My first question is, you've written a few books and you've been talking about and studying the jihadist extremists, Al-Qaeda, for years. The Secretary of Defense, Pete Hegseth, and others are comparing the drug cartels to Al-Qaeda. What do you, being the expert, make of that comparison and why they're doing it?
Well, first of all, it's not a good comparison. For many reasons, and I've written about this going back years, I think a starting point is why we shouldn't call drug trafficking organizations terrorist organizations, right? These are cartels. Their business is profit. It's not politics. So they're distinctly different organizations with different objectives. And the risk we run when we call everybody a terrorist group is that nobody's a terrorist group. I think the reason why they're doing it, there's a clear narrative that the administration is trying to build. Now, remember, Trump ran on a campaign of ending endless wars. We attacked the Iranian nuclear program, stirring up, or getting kind of closer involved in the conflict in the Middle East. Now in our own backyard in the Western Hemisphere, we're seemingly at war with. We've now hit, I think, there's been 9 separate strikes on multiple boats with alleged narco traffickers killed just in the past few months. We're seemingly at war with Venezuelan transnational gangs / drug cartels that the administration has reflagged as terrorist groups. And because they've, ran on this campaign of ending endless wars, they're telling you, well, we have to do this because these guys are as bad as Al-Qaeda, but they're fundamentally different. It's not to say they're not a threat, but they're not Al-Qaeda.
How are they a threat?
Well, they are transporting. I don't know about these individuals that we killed because nobody knows much about them. Right. The administration hasn't been transparent. We do know there are transnational criminal networks that smuggle drugs, including fentanyl, into the United States. The administration's viewpoint is that these groups are just as deadly as terrorist groups, and that if we kill enough of them, that'll serve as a deterrent. As you know, it does nothing to address the demand side in our country. And it's also uncertain that we'll be able to play whack-a-mole endlessly and actually deter these groups from continuing to try to push drugs into the country.
So they pose a threat by maybe bringing drugs into this country. They have always been bringing drugs in this country, of course, as you mentioned, because we love them. America loves drugs, me included.
You mentioned the war on drugs, and I'd say drugs won that war.
It's an interesting thing. I was thinking about that. It's like the war on poverty or the war on drugs, and people say, well, they didn't work. And the idea is, well, what if we didn't do what we were doing? It would have been that much worse. It's hard to prove a negative, but clearly when it comes to the war on drugs, whatever the goals were meant, we lost. I mean, we legalized a lot of drugs. We've experimented with all kinds of different public policy, allowing people to shoot up heroin in clinics and so on. We could talk about what works and what doesn't work, but the demand is obviously still there, even for some of these harder drugs that are more dangerous. But it's always been this way. And these drugs have always been coming through Mexico, South and Central America. So just talk to me a little bit about the history of what has worked and what hasn't worked. And of course, I think the big question is the difference between military and police or law enforcement solutions, because they have way different resources, different laws, different abilities, and different outcomes. So how did it work in the past?
So in the past, we've used a law enforcement-led approach, working with partner nations, what we call security cooperation, and building partner capacity. We've worked with those other countries to try to strengthen some of what we call the kind of soft side of counterterrorism counter narcotics. That's building up judiciaries, building up, a cadre of law enforcement, intelligence, and prosecutors that could actually prosecute these people and hold them in jail. We've tried to interdict supply lines. It's not to say the military hasn't been involved at all, but it's primarily been in a supporting role, if that, supplying intelligence to law enforcement. Now, Venezuela is not a government that we're going to work with because it's highly adversarial to the United States. We can work with partner nations in the region who have a vested interest in this, like the Colombians, who we worked with for many years, like others in the region that also don't want to see these cartels becoming really powerful and rich.
I always wondered why it wasn't more of a military solution in the past. How come there wasn't special forces units or military action, more traditional, taken against drug cartels in Mexico or Central and South America? And how come those leaders of those countries wouldn't want America to come? Because you could argue it's in their interest for us to stop. Obviously, there's a lot of corruption. There's a lot of payoffs and so on. But if you have a whole field where you're growing the raw materials you need for drugs, why aren't we just bombing that? Why aren't we sending the Navy SEALs in to kill all of the drug cartel leaders and people that are doing it? Why haven't we done that in the past? And why haven't those nations invited us to?
Well, if we started doing that, we'd be doing it in perpetuity. Where would it end? I even go back to the poorly named global war on terrorism. Did we really mean a war against a tactic? We never declared war on Blitzkrieg in World War II. It didn't make any sense. And we really didn't mean a global war on terrorism. We meant a global war on Sunni jihadists. And that was a very narrow slice of this, right? We didn't really go after groups like FARC or Sendero Luminoso in Peru and some of these other groups. We cared about a specific type of terrorist group. We should have called it the global war on Al-Qaeda if we were going to call it anything.
Yeah.
That would be a more discrete endpoint. It's a bit more measurable and it's less open-ended. So the Navy SEALs are the best in the world at killing people. We could send them around to kill whoever we wanted. It would just never stop in that case. The other piece of this is, and there's a scholar named Vanda Felbab Brown who's got a great book called Shooting Up, Counterinsurgency and the War on Drugs. And one of the paradoxes she describes, and she looks at case studies in Afghanistan, Burma, Colombia, and elsewhere, is a lot of times what the military is doing and what, let's say, for example, the DEA is doing or counter narcotics police are doing are working at cross purposes. So you have guys coming in, they're burning crops, right? They're telling villagers that they need to replace opium with saffron. And at the same time, we're trying to, quote unquote, win hearts and minds. Well, if these people were fence sitters, right, they didn't support us, they didn't support the insurgents. When we came in and burned down their fields of how they made a living, they most certainly support the insurgents in the aftermath of that. So it's really kind of, we're trying to do two different missions at once, and we've never quite been able to sing from the same sheet of music when it comes to figuring out these very intractable conflicts.
My understanding, too, is that the return on saffron might not be as big as the return on the raw materials for all of the rest of the drugs, cocoa. And so, I mean, like,
it's naive.
You can't blame a farmer for growing the crop that's going to make them the most money.
Certainly.
Especially in that part of the world where there's not a lot of other ways to make money, certainly not in agriculture. One of the other issues is that you guys write about is that the U.S. would be doing this unilaterally. Like, where are all of our partners in Latin America on this, and why haven't they joined forces with the Department of War?
Yeah, we just haven't done the necessary groundwork from a diplomatic standpoint to raise this issue, to bring nations together, to explain why it's a problem, to explain what we can do about it, to explain what resources are available. We've charged ahead. We've done it unilaterally, and we've done it with very little transparency to those nations or the American public who, seemingly would like to know why we're now at war with Venezuela or Tren de Aragua or unnamed Colombian fishermen. One of the things that we also haven't thought through, and I think, what we're seeing is tactics devoid from strategy, right? Nobody's better than the United States at taking out a target in a drone strike. We've perfected the art of that. We've done that over 20 years of the global war on terrorism. What I haven't seen is the connection to any kind of broader strategy or any acknowledgement that if things really heat up, these groups could escalate in the United States, what we call horizontal escalation in the paper, because if they're as powerful as the administration says they are, remember, these are Al-Qaeda, they're just as dangerous. Couldn't they, and they're already in the United States, couldn't they presumably conduct ambush attacks, sniper attacks, IED attacks in urban areas? I think they probably could. And so if we get to that kind of a place, Americans are going to want to know, why is there a car bomb going off in Chicago?
Yeah, that's terrifying. What about specifically about Mexico? You take it kind of case by case or country by country here. It's different leadership, as you mentioned. I mean, we have a much better relationship with Mexico, it would seem, than we do with Venezuela, a better relationship with Argentina, apparently, than Colombia. And it sounds like we've made best friends with the leaders of Trinidad and Tobago. Like, it sounds like the United States government, Hegseth, is working hand in hand. I don't know what they're getting out of that relationship, but it would seem that a lot of the drugs that are coming from South America are on their way to the Trinidad. And that's not America. I've heard that that's a stop on the way to Europe, where they're also in a lot of demand for drugs. So start with our partnership in Mexico and the problem there and how that would look and how that would work.
Yeah, so historically, the Mexicans, and rightfully so, have been very protective of their sovereignty, have been very wary of U.S. kind of boots on the ground there, even in a supportive or training role. We have, through the Merida Initiative, supplied intelligence, equipment, attempting to help build partner capacity with the Mexicans. In some of these cases, the cartels there, whether it's, we go back to when Los Zetas was a thing, these were former Mexican special forces. They're getting a lot of their weapons from the United States, actually. And so they're outgunning the local police. Look, one of the things that you don't want to do is go in front of Congress and say, hey, we have a problem, but I have a solution. It's going to cost a lot of money. It's going to take a long time, and it's not guaranteed to succeed. That's the truth of the matter, but you'll get kicked out on your ass faster than you went in the door. So anybody that's trying to explain this as a simple process of just pinpricking a couple of boats in the water is not being honest with you.
Also, you mentioned that one of the arguments that's constantly made is they're sending poison into our country. They're killing Americans, so we're going to kill them. But as you just mentioned, we're sending plenty of guns into their countries too. Their reaction isn't, we're going to attack America for shipping all these guns in, which is where they're coming from. I mean, it's not official government business to send guns. It's not official government business to send drugs. But both of them are really dangerous and bad and kill people. And yet the reaction of those countries in Latin America that are now having all this gun violence as a result of our guns being sent there is not the same as ours. That's
great point. Again, it's also, I haven't seen an explanation of a comprehensive approach here that would address demand side. And if we're going to go after entities that are poisoning Americans, where do we go next? Processed food companies, right? I mean, who are we attacking after this? The gluten people? The war on gluten?
I've always said, if to national security experts and to anybody listening to me, I've always said, if you're more worried about a terrorist attack than a heart attack, you've been duped. If we talk about national security from the standpoint of what the greatest threats to you and your family are, it's probably sugar or any number of other things that kill us. That's not how we look at the threat matrix, obviously.
John Mueller used to call it the bathtub fallacy because you were more likely to die in slipping in your bathtub than you were from a terrorist.
Yeah. That's important. It's important, I think, I've always lived my life that way, to think in terms of what the threats were as a parent as well. I've been a lot more worried about, my daughter driving a car late at night than somebody attacking her, kidnapping her, or some nonsense like that. Getting back, though, to Mexico, what might we do there in partnership with them?
Again, it's not super sexy, but to be effective, and it's going to take a long time, is helping them build counter-corruption authorities, helping them build a judiciary. One of the problems is people get arrested and then they're out the back door because of the threat of what they call plumo a plato, silver or lead, right? There's a lot of extortion, coercion that goes on there. And then also, I think supplying intelligence, including, through the use of drones, training the Mexican law enforcement with various technologies that we have access to. So there's a lot of things we could do first before threatening to go to war with the country. I think, President Sheinbaum has been willing to work with President Trump. I think there's somewhat of an affinity there despite all the tariff situation. And so, again, before militarizing the war on drugs and starting a whole new GWOT, global war on terrorism, because again, now by law in the United States, these are designated foreign terrorist organizations. We are at war with a terrorist group, even if they, are really a cartel or a drug trafficking organization. Walking through that and explaining that to the American people. Why are we doing what we're doing, and what is the end goal? How do we know that we will have succeeded? Where are the goalposts, and will they continue to move?
A guy like you must be a lot more annoyed than someone like me, because I'm pretty annoyed by the fact that the word terrorist has no meaning anymore. I mean, you're an expert on terrorism, and if you're shipping drugs, you're a terrorist, and if you're protesting at an O'King's, you're a terrorist. And yet so often when, especially right-wing white supremacists go in and shoot up a bunch of black people in a church, or Hispanic people or Jewish people, we don't call them terrorists, even though one might argue that they are. We don't have domestic terrorism laws, and we can talk about that. But the idea that everyone is a terrorist it means that nobody is a terrorist, or that the word doesn't have that much meaning in conversation, much less in policy.
It's fundamentally disingenuous on top of that. So the other example, besides the cartels being reflagged as designated FTOs, Department of Homeland Security Secretary Kristi Noem compared from a domestic standpoint. She said, well, Antifa is just as dangerous as ISIS or Hezbollah. I mean, if you polled 100 terrorism experts, you would find 0 people that actually agreed with that statement. So, I mean, it's not even in the realm of being partially believable.
I find it dumb because I don't know what Antifa is. Like, I don't know anybody who identifies as Antifa. It is not an organized group. It is people don't generally refer to themselves as Antifa. And it's unlike every other organization, crime organization ever. It isn't one. It's just it's a movement. It's an idea. And by the way, it's a good idea. Anti-fascism is a good idea in general. I thought all Americans believed that, but don't get me started on that. I mean, language matters though.
Look, let me just pick on that scab for a second, because, I wrote a piece in War on the Rocks a couple of years ago called What is Antifa? What is it not? And why does it matter? And War on the Rocks, which is traditionally a conventional warfare, hard security type of site, it's been the second most read article ever on that site. So myself and my co-author, Michael Kennedy, tried to bring some clarity there. But the Overton window has shifted, and I'm willing to play the game. So let's accept on face value that Antifa is a terrorist organization if the administration says it is. What I want to do is, that's your premise. Let's look at all the other groups that are domestic terrorist organizations, the Base, Adam Waffen, all these neo-Nazis and white supremacists. Let's have a hearing on Capitol Hill where 4 nonpartisan terrorism experts come there with data and talk about, let's rack and stack the threats and the priorities and which groups are the most dangerous. And then let's start at the top and designate those first. And I don't think Antifa is going to hit the top 10. But this isn't about that. It's about politics. It's about going after your adversaries. And it's about, just because I said so, that's what it is.
Americans, especially white Americans, are not allowed to be classified as terrorists. I'm old enough to have covered the Obama administration when the Homeland Security head was Janet Napolitano, and they put out a paper where they said that a lot of, unfortunately, veterans were likely to become extremists. And it became very political, that paper, and she had to apologize and withdraw it, even though it was 1,000% accurate and important to recognize that, so that, as you have always been doing, getting at the root causes of why people do what they do and why they join organizations or why they become radicalized or extremists, violent extremists. And if you're just going to cancel out people because they served, because they're veterans, because they're white, well, then you're canceling out probably the greatest threat in America. I've always thought that domestic white anti-government, extremists are far more dangerous because they're here and they can blend in, and you can't classify them, and it's politically incorrect. So it's such an injustice and so political, obviously, when the greatest threat is now not even considered a threat. And arguably a lot of the people that are extremists are literally working, as I know in the federal government, including some of those insurrectionists on January 6th. They're working now in the government. It's pretty scary.
It's hard when I hear the president list off the biggest threats emanating from political violence and fail to mention the Whitmer plot, fail to mention the individual that tried to burn down Governor Shapiro's residence in Pennsylvania. So is it only political violence when it happens to the right? What about when it happens to the left? I don't care about right or left. I'm actually politically registered independent, and I always have been. I care about Americans and keeping Americans safe. So I don't get into this whole game, and I don't appreciate it when the administration does.
Yeah.
Either way, left or right.
I hear that. I am political. I'm overtly progressive, but I have eyes and ears, and I pay close attention and cover the news. And so you can count, and there are organizations like yours that keep track of plots, whether they're carried out, attempted, or not. And the threat of jihadist terrorism has been lower even at 9/11 and post 9/11 based on my eyes and ears and keeping track of the plots, whether they were carried out or not, which doesn't mean they're not a threat. Of course they are. But when you're working in government or non-governmental agencies, my understanding is you resource things based on how big of a threat it is. There's a reason why Atlanta doesn't have snowplows. Why would you spend a whole bunch of money on a snowplow when you never have snow?
You should be agnostic to the ideology,
right?
But not agnostic to understanding the ideology. I want to know, I want to take this apart and see why it ticks, but I'm not defending one side or the other. I'm worried about defending against the threat, wherever that's emanating from, how these individuals are getting their weapons, what's motivating them to attack. And, if that changes and all of a sudden it's left wing, well, I'm concerned about that. If it's right wing, I'm concerned about that. If it's incels, neo-Luddites, jihadists, it doesn't really matter to me why you're committing acts of terrorism and political violence. My job is to think about how to counter that.
Neo-Luddite, that's like the Unabomber, like people who are anti-technology.
So we're seeing a real revival of that.
Really?
With the ubiquity of artificial intelligence, of people that are scared of what that may portend, of widespread job loss. And so we're starting to see acts of violence against infrastructure, 5G cell towers. There's a lot of kind of overlap with conspiracy theories. And these days we have what we call the salad bar, where people kind of pick and choose from different ideologies. And the internet enables that, right? And so if you've seen a couple of the last attackers, high-profile attacks, it's been a weird amalgamation of different things that don't normally nest together.
Let's go back to the paper and the threats and head to Venezuela. And my understanding is there's like an aircraft carrier now off the coast of Venezuela. I mean, I don't know what the Southern Command, which is the military in that part of the globe, has done historically, or where carrier groups lived in Southern Command, how often they were there, or it looks like a lot of this were flying bombers near the South American countries and so on. A lot of it seems to be saber rattling and just this kind of muscular threat. We've seen this throughout history from different countries, including the U.S. We send a carrier to the Persian Gulf, just let them know we're there. We've got assets in the region, and that somehow may affect behavior. What do you make of that? And also, we've got General Eisenhower saying that we're going to take troops maybe onto what we're doing in the sea from drones or whatever. We're going to maybe do that on the land as well. It's pretty dangerous rhetoric. If it leads to action, it's real bad, I think.
So we're moving major military muscle into the region. And let's start with the fact that even a country like the United States, which is inarguably the world's greatest military power, we still have fixed and finite assets. So we're taking something and moving it to the Southcom AOR. It's leaving somewhere else where it's serving a purpose. So you can only continue to mass and threaten and attempt to coerce up to a certain point, when at a certain point, the other side's going to call your bluff. I think the intent here is to rattle Maduro to the point where he negotiates some kind of exile and flees the country. I've heard, Bashar al-Assad is living in Moscow now, and he's become an avid gamer. Maybe he needs a roommate. I'm not sure. So maybe Maduro's getting ready to head over there, and those guys can go team up and play some Xbox. But this is also, in addition to running on ending endless wars, this is somebody that's talked at length about the neocons and anti-regime change. And now we're doing that with no strategy. Go back to the Colin Powell Pottery Barn rule. You break it, you own it. Do we want to own Venezuela? I don't think so. I don't.
They're not even as smart as those guys were, and those guys weren't very smart. They certainly got everything wrong, and the risks that they took ended up being disgraceful, and history should remember them as such, in my opinion. But, look at just Colombia. My understanding is they were our best partner and have been for 50 years. and our president just cut them off. And for what? It's the tactics and techniques that are taking, like for an analyst like yourself, it's like, I don't even know how you look at these because they were never even on the table. And they often are just the kind of behavior of a madman. You know, he tears Canada, our best friend, like crazy. And then they talk and all this work goes into negotiations. Then he wakes up in the middle of the night, I don't like you anymore. I don't like that commercial, more tariffs. We're at the will of a madman who is making decisions that will about relationships with nations who we've been friends with forever. Talk to me about Colombia and the work that we do hand in hand with them.
Some might call it foreign policy malpractice. One week we're talking about Ukraine, the next it's Greenland, then we're focused on the Panama Canal. So not really locked in, right? No grand strategy underpinning a kind of broader, there's no kind of sense of reassurance that this is the A team and that what they're doing is going to lead the United States to greater influence and prosperity. To go to Colombia, though, you're absolutely right. They've been a very valued partner. We've used them in almost a train-the-trainer model in that part of the world where we've trained the Colombians to such a degree that they now go train others in the mold that we've trained them. But I will say none of that happened by chance. It was part of Plan Colombia, which was a multi-year, multi-billion-dollar investment to help reduce the threat in that country of FARC, of ELN, of other non-state armed groups. It worked, but it took a lot of focus, a lot of resources, and a commitment to stay with it and not just veer to the next bright, shiny object, whatever that is. And I don't know that the administration has that kind of staying power.
They don't. The answer is they don't, I think. In the past, we have the United States with its partners, Mexico especially. I can think of a whole bunch of drug lords like El Chapo who were captured. How were they captured? Somebody turned them in. Somebody dropped a dime. They're hard to find. The point I'm making is you don't have to be an expert in law enforcement or counterterrorism to know that you want to flip the smaller guys. Same thing when it comes to all organized crime. So you can get to the top guys. And when you get to the top guys, you can make a serious dent in their business, which is what it is. It's a multi-billion-dollar business. That's what we should be doing in your What Should the United States Do part of this new issue brief. You talk about this. We should provide military intelligence, logistics, equipment support to our Mexican partners in coordinates with long-standing practice. In a way, you're saying we should be doing the things that we have been doing because those things do work. We're never, as you say, going to eradicate drugs because of America's demand for drugs. But a lot of these types of techniques and tactics, law enforcement and military intelligence, they do work, right? To try to take down the leaders of these cartels because that matters.
It does. You know, when you take out a high value target, there's always going to be someone coming up the pipeline next. And sometimes it's going to be someone perhaps more cunning and even more violent. There's a criminologist, Richard Fryman, who's talked about vacancy chains and written about this extensively. There's an analog to counterterrorism where we kind of take out the leadership. And then there's always going to be someone coming up the pipeline to replace these individuals. Look, the current kind of tactics we're using are unsustainable. We're not just going to maintain drones in the air that are consistently, it gets us back into this conversation of whack-a-mole. It gets us back into the conversation we were having during the peak of the global war on terrorism, which was, are we creating more terrorists than we're killing, right? With the collateral damage and civilian casualties that we wrought in parts of federally administered tribal areas in Pakistan, right? A whole generation of people. And there, oftentimes we followed what we call pattern of life. You know, we're watching somebody move around. We're saying they're doing things that a terrorist might be doing. A lot of people use boats for a lot of different reasons. We're told that there's hard and fast intelligence saying who these people are and what they're doing. If that's true, you know, a little bit of transparency, I think, would go a long way. Sharing that with the American public, because a lot of people are in the dark on this. And I think a lot of people, including not many, but some in Congress, have a problem with us just killing nameless people.
Yeah, most people don't, unfortunately, care about the United States government killing people who we deem as bad. Due process, who cares about it? In war, it's obviously that's what happens. But this is not some conventional war. I mean, I was also on the radio talking in 2011 about a guy named Anwar al-Awlaki, who President Obama had assassinated. And the left, of course, went nuts about that. But the vast majority of Americans didn't actually care that a guy who arguably, even though he was American born, he arguably radicalized more young men than almost anybody else. A lot of people didn't have a problem with him being killed. I certainly didn't cry about it. I wasn't upset that he was off the board. But that's not how it should be done legally. And if we all agree about the root of the problem, that doesn't work either. Arguably, you might have made more terrorists as a result of that. And even worse, we had some real bad misses where we killed wedding parties because we thought they were bad guys in Afghanistan and elsewhere. The idea that we're just shooting on boats and blowing them up, and even more importantly, that a couple of guys somehow survived a submarine. I got to understand how that worked, being blown out of the water. And then they were just sent back. They weren't arrested. They weren't tried. How important is it to do kind of like law and order and have due process and capture and interrogate people if we think they're doing bad things like transporting fentanyl?
Look, it's incredibly important because we're the world's leading superpower. I don't know for how much longer, but what we do sets precedent. And so if tomorrow the Chinese turn around and start smoking vessels in the South China Sea and saying, well, they were bad people, trust us, what are we to say? We wouldn't have a leg to stand on when it comes to pushing back. Everybody has drones now, states, non-states. I mean, the capability, the barrier to entry has been lowered significantly. You have individuals that know how to operate very sophisticated drones and unmanned aerial systems. So we're going to be living in a world very soon where this capability has democratized and proliferated, and we're not going to be able to throw the bullshit flag when some random country starts smoking dudes crossing their border and saying, well, sorry, those guys were, they were animal poachers, so we had to kill them. Trust us.
You underestimate America's ability to throw the bullshit flag no matter what is happening.
Yeah.
Hey, you can't do that.
Legitimacy underpinning it then.
Exactly. I mean, it's just crazy to see this type of action being carried out apparently on a daily basis. I mean, it's really, really bad for a lot of different reasons. In conclusion, Dr. Colin Clarke, and really interesting paper, and people should read it, and people should go look into all the great work that the Soufan Center is doing, where you are, of course, the executive director, have a lot of experience in this. What in an ideal world, if policymakers were listening to you, should be done?
I think we should take a step back. I think, I'm someone that's always believed in transparency. Let's have a hearing on Capitol Hill, talk about what the threat actually looks like and what are some smart policies to deal with it, and bring nonpartisan analysts, researchers in the field. And, I can think of 10 off the top of my head that are qualified to do this, and have this debate out in public and let that inform or shape policy. This isn't something that should be done with deals cut in back rooms. And this is foreign policy by Twitter. Where we announced that we've just taken 14 people off the earth, but trust us, they were bad and they were going to do bad things to your country. That's a very slippery slope, in my opinion, and it's one that we're heading down rather quickly at the moment.
It's really interesting to try to understand the work that you guys do at the Soufan Center, and you're talking about having experts testify. But I mean, those experts are also inside the Pentagon and other national security apparatus and agencies throughout the country. And I just wonder if policymakers are listening to them, if there's been a brain drain, if they've left, if they're getting bad advice, if it's all political. Do policymakers reach out to you? When I saw this paper come out, as a quote journalist or a member of the media, I'm interested because I want to educate and inform people listening and watching about the importance of these issues and talk to an expert like yourself. But it would be a lot more heartening and make more of an impact, I think, if you had senators on the Intel Committee or any other Homeland Security asking you guys to come and testify, or just consulting you privately. Does that happen?
It does. I will say, and we work across the aisle. It's something we pride ourselves on. We work with Republicans, Democrats, those in the middle. Our job is to keep Americans safe, to identify threats to the U.S. homeland, and to come up with recommendations, policy recommendations to prevent those threats from manifesting. And that's why we wrote this paper. We saw a threat. In this case, again, to reiterate, the threat is real. I'm not arguing that we should do something about it. It's what we should do about it.
the last thing I just thought of this, but something I keep hearing about a lot is like the military is currently doing the Coast Guard's job. Doesn't the Coast Guard detain vessels all the time? Not only because they're shipping drugs, but they could be shipping, animals that, rare exotic animals that are illegal to kill, or ivory, or any number of contraband substances, objects. The Coast Guard does this. That's what they do. They guard the fucking coast. And now we've got the Air Force and the Navy way off of America's coasts on the offensive. And it would seem like a complete inappropriate use of the military in the place of what the Coast Guard is generally supposed to do, or other domestic agencies.
It's reinventing the wheel, and it's kind of, for no reason. And I think you actually captured it perfectly. You just said the Coast Guard's motto, which is guard the fucking coast. And that's what they should be doing, and we should be helping them do that.
You're helping us understand all of it, and your analysis is always welcome here. I really appreciate you joining me today to talk about all this. Tell all my friends over at Soufan Center I said hello, and keep up the great work, man. I hope everybody goes and reads this paper, Colin. Really appreciate you joining me.
Thanks for having me. All
right. There he goes. Colin Clarke. Go support all of the work being done at the Soufan Center, the SoufanCenter.org. And I was real happy to catch up with Colin, and I am very happy that so many of you joined me during the live conversation on YouTube and stand up on Substack. If you're not following those places, please do, as well as Threads and Blue Sky and Facebook and Instagram. I'm still on Twitter. It's live, believe it or not. That's all I've got for you, though, today, and I really appreciate you joining me and supporting me. Cannot do it without your support. Patreon.com/Pete Dominic. I hope you have a great Wednesday. I hope to see you at tomorrow night's hangout, and I'm very thankful that you were here today, and I look forward to talking to you tomorrow. Okay, John Carroll taking us out as he does every day.
Boy, you better stand up. Stand up. Well, there's a whole lot more of us who know what's right. They'll keep right on ignoring us if we keep sitting tight. You got to open up the window to let in some light. You got to stand up. That's right. You got to rise up. You got to stand up. You got to stare the devil straight in the eye. We got to let him know it's his turn to go. Off of your butt, get down off of your fence. Even if it ain't a very friendly audience, well, they'll begin to listen when you start making sense. And you stand up, stand up. No need to point your rifle to defend your town. Just stand up, stand up. You know they can't deny you what you're laying down. Boy, you better stand up, stand up. Show your face of every color, yellow, black, red, and brown. She's the place where every lost child will finally be found. There's only one thing to do before we stand our ground, and that's stand up, stand up. Well, the founding fathers saw a land for all. They had to stand up, they had to stand up. They had a keen imagination for a crystal ball, drawing all the plans of stand up. But all they had to go on was the time they were in, with other causes for laws, and since they weren't even sin, they knew that change was gonna come before the change could begin. They had to stand up. All right, they had to stand up. We got to stand up. We got to look the devil square in the eye. We gotta let him know it's his time to go, and make it clear when all we hear is a lie. See him flee the scene of that experiment. If you stand up, alright, we got to speak up, we got to reach up, and raise your voice in every way you know how. Don't be toes up, you got to show up. Ain't no better time to do it but now. No need to pledge allegiance to no wanton tribe. Rise up, show obedience focus to the voice inside and listen well, and it'll tell you not to run and hide. It says stand